we mean when we say coming of age.
I think of coming of age as sort of like an initiatory process into like sort of like a certain spiritual archetype or like a certain like position of growth, maybe a position of like hierarchy within a family. It's sort of like assuming a new role. So I think we often think of coming of age is like this idea of like becoming either like a teenagehood or like going through puberty, entering like adolescence. And that is one coming of age moment. But I think that you can experience coming of age sort of like at any age, depending on like what the experience is. So that's what I mean. What do you mean when you think of that?
Yeah, for me, coming of age is all about transitions. The transition between different cycles of life. There's oftentimes something that has to be left behind to make these transitions, and coming of age is kind of about letting go of something that is not going to be as much a part of your life moving forward, and that creates space for you to take new responsibilities, and kind of step into new roles in the world. Some would say this is about like taking responsibility and increasing your capacity.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, even like sort of classic coming of age stories always seem to there seems to be like quite a shuffling of things. Like life gets disrupted and the child has to like assume the role of a more mature uh you know, self. And I think that we tend to like sort of like forget in adulthood because like adulthood is so long and such a lengthy portion of our lives, we forget that there's like moments of growth happening in there too. And we've also sort of like let go of the archetypes and then and naming of those archetypes that we grow into as we get older. And so we like lose track of the ways that we come of age in adulthood too. Um, but I think we're constantly like kind of constantly, if you allow yourself to, like you're kind of constantly finding moments to transition and transform.
So there's a version of like coming of age that it's kind of like the story is like baby to child to adolescent to adult. And that's, not a lot of stages there. You
Mhm.
talked about archetypes, and I'm curious if you want to expand on archetypes in the coming of age cycle.
For sure. So I think that you're right in that like the assuming of more responsibility seems to be like sort of like the crux of a coming of age experience. Um, I think that uh there seems to be like a major general crux that happens at parenthood where you become either like a matriarch or a patriarch and you're sort of like leading a group of young people. Um, that doesn't have to come through literal parenthood. That can happen like through like becoming a teacher or a mentor or like reaching the stage of like teaching those that are younger than us. And then I think that we can also reach a like sort of like familial hierarchical space where like say the eldest generation dies off and you like assume the role of the eldest generation. And sometimes that can happen like quite early. And I wouldn't quite say that those people are elders as much as they are like maybe also in like the matriarchal, patriarchal space where they're like ruling over a family at large, larger than
Mm,
like just an immediate family.
right.
And then they're sort of like reaching uh, deeply into age, deeply aging. And those people are sort of like coming into this place of eldership where they realize that they have to, one, like sort of give up some of their physical uh, capabilities just because they're not able to anymore. So they have to like lend some of that responsibility off to other people and ultimately sort of like embrace death, but in embracing death, sort of become a more of a spiritual mentor.
Mm. I love that idea of sort of embracing depth and embracing the role of spiritual mentorship. And yeah, I feel like that's something that's not really very commonly seen in the mainstream culture these days. Um, there's so much negative energy towards like aging in general. It's like people have this sense that aging comes with just like pure downside. It's right. It's like your body's getting weaker, you're getting less respect, and you're going to be less attractive. I think that's a lot of the fear around aging is just like becoming less attractive in some sense, and not being in connection with your like youthful vitality and energy. Do you think those narratives are true, Shelby?
Definitely not. First off, I just don't think, I mean, maybe I'm a little bit of a traditionalist in this way, but I just don't think that like beauty, especially when it comes to like being old, like beauty is not like physical beauty is not like very important. Um, and I think that if you're spending the time to like cultivate spiritual richness throughout your life, it like shows in your body. And ultimately, like, even if you age, like, you appear incredibly vibrant and beautiful if you like allow that sort of like outs or inside out sort of lifestyle. So there's all this obsession with like sort of tinkering with the outside, and there doesn't seem to be like too much focus
Mm.
on the inside. I assume that you find old people beautiful. I feel like we're both old people appreciators.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of wisdom and kindness in old people. Elders have been very good to me in my life. I've learned a lot from them. Um, in general, like elders just seem to have a lovely energy, and they tend to um tend to be less inclined to fight about things that don't matter. And I think
Um,
that's kind of a young person's game, is like arguing a lot about things that don't matter. And you expend all this energy, and it's kind of like that's the youth, the arrogance of youth is you have all this energy and you use it in the stupidest, most counterproductive way, just as like a flex that you that you have it. And it's one of those things where when you're young, you don't really have a lot of discernment. You don't really know what's important in life. You don't know what to value. You don't know what order to place those values in. And I think elders have a lot of wisdom and lived experience to share with us about placing your values in the right order and what really matters in life.
yeah.
And they're kind of almost an antidote, I think, to sort of just like this mainstream culture about like hustling and like your career is the most important thing in the world, and all these like superficial social media, markers of status and prestige. None of those things are really going to bring you anything that endures. And there's a lot to learn from elders about what wealth means, I think, like true wealth.
Yeah. I think about that too. Like, I think you and I are both like very health conscious people. And I'm often like sort of drawn in by the opposition of like, I don't know, trying to figure out how to balance being a healthy person and not being like so obsessed with health that I like become afraid of death and don't like risk living. Um, and I feel like the older generations may have been a little bit more interested in the living part of life than like the preserving of life.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. I think somebody could probably make the argument the opposite direction.
Yeah. So on this theme of coming of age, and kind of like living life, why is coming of age important for living life?
I mean, to me, I'm not an old person, although I do feel that I've probably uh, lived on this earth more than once.
Hmm.
Just an instinct.
You
Um,
have kind of that old soul, like this isn't my first lap around the block energy.
so do you. You know, I think that we're both like Saturn people. Like you're
Mm.
an Aquarius, right?
I'm a Scorpio.
You're Scorpio, but you have an Aquarius something?
I actually don't know a lot about my astrological chart. I've been keeping that information mostly safe and secure for my future wife to explore.
That's good. That's healthy, I think. Well, I have a Capricorn moon, so I feel connected to the Saturn
Hmm.
energy of like sort of like old people. Old people are Saturnian. Um,
Yeah, rings, right?
yeah, yeah. But I think that when you get into old age, if you aren't doing this sort of like coming of age work throughout adulthood, it can be really difficult to feel purposeful as an old person because you're kind of like, how did I get here? Um, and you're like, what is my purpose now? If not to be this like young, vibrant person who like is physically capable, and you haven't like completed that arc. You sort of like stalled out kind of early, and now death is approaching, and there's this like sort of like purposelessness that I think one can feel in their old age. So to me, like I think that this arc is one like beneficial to all of us. Like I think it's good for other people to like see us have this experience of like change. Um, but I also think that as an individual, it's really important to like the completion of a full life to have gone through these various stages and like really embodied them and worked with them.
Yeah, there's something about in the modern world it seems like there's a lot of maybe gravity or kind of a stickiness to certain phases in the coming of age cycle. And I think adolescence in particular seems like it's sort of a stage people get stuck in.
Yeah.
And there's something about this protracted sort of like refusal to take on responsibilities. You can kind of like imagine the like perpetual college student, right? It's like you're a teenager, you graduate high school, you go to college, you're studying, and then you're like, oh, I don't quite feel right somehow. I don't feel like ready for the world. So they do a grad degree, they do a PhD, maybe even, and then, they've spent almost their entire 20s studying and they haven't been really engaging with the real world.
Yeah.
Um, and there's something about this way you get stuck in these phases, and I'm curious about the idea of rituals, and how rituals might enable us to assume new roles. Do you have any thoughts about rituals?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've always like had rituals sort of like built in. Actually, I'd like to talk about something more like related to the current culture
Mm,
first that
yes,
I think might like lay some context. Would you agree that like teenagehood is like pretty romanticized?
I think so. It's kind of like the ideal state of being developed enough that you can do the fun hedonistic adult things but also have no responsibilities, basically.
Mhm.
You're kind of in like the like safe space. And teenagers, even like, you don't get consequences for like serious crimes often.
Right.
It's like
Right.
people are just like, oh yeah, you're 15 years old, like, how could you know that you're not supposed to have done that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there seems to be like sort of a looseness, and even like the law is looser for minors, right? And so, yeah, I mean, there's sort of like this like joy of being young and reckless and irresponsible, and like being in that freedom. I think that probably people miss that sense of freedom, and I think that
Mhm.
especially as we become like a more sort of like surveilled society, uh, I think it makes sense to me that people might miss this sort of sense of I could do anything that I want and no one would see it, or no, there would be like sort of like no consequence. Um, but in terms of rituals, I don't know if there are that many rituals now. I mean, I think that people are creating rituals all the time, but
Mhm.
not in like a there have in the past like been like very clear rituals that people engaged with that sort of like ushered them into a new phase of life. And now I feel like we're sort of like in a reset mode where we're like trying to figure out how to re-implement those things, because they seem to like have sort of like divorced themselves from religious practices. Um I don't know. How do you feel about it? Well, do you have like specific rituals that you have in mind when you think of coming of age rituals?
Yeah, I think, there's you think about like the 18th birthday and kind of the classic thing is like, oh, you can buy cigarettes and a lottery ticket now and, a porno magazine. Like you can do something fun and cheeky to celebrate turning 18. There's I think about things like getting your driver's license or your driver's learning permit when you're in high school. Those are kind of like things that people would used to ritualize the expansion of responsibility and increased freedom and mobility in the world. And something I've been struck by is that people are a lot less interested in getting their driver's license at kind of the like what you would have historically called the normal age. There's a lot of people who are just kind of like skipping that almost.
Yes. There seem to be a lot of teenagers who are like quite avoidant of that. And they'll tell you, they're like, why do I need to? Like, I just have my friends on my phone. Like, or my friends will drive me. There's a lot of people who like will just
Yeah.
carpool. That's like their whole sort of existence. Um, yeah, and then I think in adulthood, the sort of rites of passage do seem to be like marriage, which again, sort of like seems to be on the fringe, or is like starting to like sort of dissipate as a norm,
Yeah.
um, or at least becoming later, later in
Yeah.
life. People are sort of like avoiding it a bit. Um, so marriage, I think parenthood, and death of a parent, I think is a huge rite of a rite of passage.
Mm.
Death of both parents, I think, is also like huge. Totally like changes your perspective and orientation to the world. Um, and yeah, I think those seem to be like the big ones to me in adulthood. Um, when it comes to parenthood, do you think that because there seems to be like quite an avoidance of parenthood and that kind of responsibility. What do you think that that's about?
Yeah, there's a lot of cultural complexity at work here. Basically, I think we have a cultural avoidance of personal responsibility in the mainstream, and there's a lot of energy in the cultural narratives that like you should be outsourcing your authority or your capacity to like a government agency or you know quote unquote the economy. Like you should be kind of waiting for these like ideal perfect conditions to give you permission to do whatever it is that you want to do.
Mm,
And you think about like the type of person who born and raised in like the safest suburb in middle class America and is talking about how they're not going to have kids because the world is so dangerous and bad now and climate change or something, yada yada yada. um that person has had a life that is materially safer and more prosperous than anyone else in human history, basically. And the conditions of the world just keep getting safer and safer. Poverty is going down, hunger is going down. All these deaths due to disease are being solved by medicine. By pretty much any objective standard, this is a safe and good time to be alive. And you compare and contrast this with like our ancestors who were fucking in dingy huts in the winter and huddled together for warmth around the campfire, burying every other kid before the age of 5. There's, I think, a level of like miscalibration maybe to just like the brutal nature of reality that modern prosperity has kind of put these like blinders over our eyes where we don't know how good we have it. We don't know how safe we have it. We don't know how much opportunity there is around us. And for all of these reasons, I think parenthood and creating life has become like less of a thing that people feel safe in order to pursue, even though it's really never been safer to do. It's a
yeah.
paradox.
Do you think that's, like, solely propaganda, or do you think that that's also, like 'cause I don't know, it feels quite genuine, like, these people genuinely seem very, like, anxious and nervous about, um
Yeah.
I hear a lot about, like, the economics of parenthood and also well, and in terms of the economics, I would say that, like, the standard of living has shifted, like,
Right.
significantly, um, and but then they talk about, you know, the ecosystem and climate change, but then they'll also talk about just, like, not wanting to pass on sort of, like, mental health issues or, like, they don't wanna, like basically, a lot of people say that they don't wanna fuck their kid up the way that their parents fucked them up. So, like, it
Mhm.
feels like it's coming from a lot of different angles.
Yeah. And I think that for the people who are like inside of those feelings and like inside of those perspectives, they do like kind of genuinely feel trapped, right? It's like it's a pessimistic view on the world, it's a pessimistic view on life. It's not an optimistic one. They don't have a lot of hope for the future. They don't have a lot of hope for themselves. And what's really tragic about that is that that kind of creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where if you don't have hope that things can get better, things probably won't get better. You're not going to take actions that make things better. And I feel a lot of genuine um, like empathy and care for people who are kind of like affected by these really negative ideas, because ideas are kind of like demons. They can haunt you, they can get attached to you, and they can stick with you. And it takes a lot of, I think, humility and courage to take a negative idea and sort of look it in the eye and say, I'm actually going to choose not to let you rule my life. I am going to believe that things can get better, that things can change. I'm going to keep trying, because I know that life is so much bigger than I am and so much more surprising. And I'm going to allow the universe to surprise me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel really similarly. I didn't want kids at all until I, like, 1, met somebody who I felt like I could have kids with, which I
Yeah.
think might be, like, a larger cultural problem too, is that, like,
Yes.
when you have a bunch of people who aren't taking responsibility, it's hard as an individual to, like, go find somebody and feel safe to, like, build responsibility with somebody else. Like, you kinda have to, like, do it first and then find somebody else who's also doing it. Um, but also historically, a lot of people have just, like, had babies and been, like, forced to take responsibility together.
Yeah.
Um, so sometimes you just have to, like, it has to be thrust upon you, you know?
Yeah. There's something about being around people who are bucking responsibility makes it more of an incentive for you to not take responsibility too. It's like nobody wants to be the guy in the group house who does all the dishes for everyone all the time.
No.
And it's a classic human nature problem because there's going to be somebody who's not doing the dishes, and that creates a gravity towards basically a messy sink and a messy life.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Totally. Yeah, how you brush your teeth,
Hmm.
you know? Um, yeah. I don't know how, like, we get out of that. I really do think that, like, the only way to think about it is that, like, responsibility has, like, high reward, you know? Um, people
And
are very
commitment, responsibility and commitment.
yeah. I would say that, like, commitment, like, almost, like, lies underneath responsibility,
Yeah,
right? Like, you kind of, like, can't be responsible if you aren't committing to the things that you say you care about.
true.
Um, and yeah, to me, like, that seems to be, like, the exit from teenagehood and into adulthood is, like, assuming responsibility for the self. Um, this is part of the reason why I think that, like, when you're around your late 20s, 30s, I mean, maybe earlier if you're wise, um, I think that, like, stopping blaming your parents for things is, like, actually really, like, beneficial. Do the
Yeah.
analysis, take the time to look at how they fucked you up or, like, what they did to you or, like, how they raised you or how they didn't fuck you up and, like,
Yeah. I mean,
take
I was gonna say spend more time on that last point because
yeah,
there's everyone has a victim mindset these days. It seems about something about their childhood and their parents,
mhm.
but not a lot of energy is focused on all the ways they loved you or sacrificed for you, and like those are the things that are extremely real and extremely invisible from a child's perspective.
Totally, totally. I didn't mean it to, like, brush over that. It's more that,
Yeah.
like, I think that it's valuable to, like, look at the shadow side of things and not have,
Yes.
like, rose-colored glasses about your experiences, and so, I think that having that time to, like, analyze and be frustrated about maybe things that were lacking and, um, acknowledging those things so that you can, like, better understand yourself, I think that that's all, like, super great and beneficial. But I do think that, like, at a certain point, you have to sort of, like, put all of that
Right.
away and say, like, "All right, I can't change what they did to me. I
Yep.
can't change who I became because of it." Or, excuse me, I can't change yeah, I guess you can't change who you became because of it, but you can change who you are going forward.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, it's part of to me, like, that's, like, the real responsibility that somebody assumes upon adulthood is this, like, yeah, the ridding oneself of the victim mindset.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
there's something about like timescales here where it's
Mhm.
like victim mindset has you looking towards the past. It has
Mhm.
you cultivating resentment and grievances and kind of ruminating on that. And taking responsibility is sort of fundamentally an orientation towards the present and the future. It's walking forward, it's showing up in the real world, like right now, today, and yeah, taking responsibility really it's the portal that gets you out of victim mindset.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. On the topic of rituals, how do you see there being a difference between, like, male and female ritualistic experiences? Are they, like do you identify a
Mm.
difference there?
Yeah, this is interesting to think about. There's definitely, I think, a lot of gendered lines for coming of age and becoming a man versus becoming a woman. We should talk more about like what it means to become a man and what it means to become a woman in a little bit.
Mhm,
um but as far as the kind of like asymmetry here goes, there's even just like a biological component to it, right? I mean, women hit puberty quicker than men,
mhm,
and um I think something about the intrinsic like nature of femininity as being really valuable and specifically like the sexual component of being a woman. As soon as a girl goes through puberty and starts developing sexually, she is going to the way the world reacts to her is going to change in a
mm,
very like dramatic way that is beyond her control. And it's going to kind of like thrust almost adulthood upon her in a way that I think adulthood isn't really thrust on men through puberty. Like boys going through puberty, they obviously have physical changes, but I don't think they have a corresponding like spiritual change where the whole world automatically is looking at them differently.
yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, even Um, I would say that that seems to, like, flip in parenthood, though, where,
Mm,
like, the woman is pregnant, so she gets to, like, commune with the idea of parenthood, like, through the physical body,
mm,
whereas, like, for the man, the child is just, like, thrust upon them, and suddenly they're having to, like,
mm,
interact with this other being. Um, and, yeah, I find that interesting that, like, those
mm.
experiences sort of, like, parallel each other.
That's a good framing for it. I like that parallel too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's cool because then, like, both genders get to, like, have that experience of, like, what it feels like to, like, assume responsibility and, like, be sort of, like, guided into it versus what it feels like to have it thrust upon you. But I would totally agree that, it's interesting to me that, like, traditionally, there weren't a whole lot of, like, initiation rituals into womanhood as much as
Mhm.
there were into manhood. And yeah, it makes sense because you have to, like, be sort of, like, you put into a circumstance to find your manhood, whereas, like,
Right.
women are sort of just, like, given the circumstance through their body.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
It's a different causal mechanism.
Yeah.
And there's this thing, on this theme of sort of like getting trapped in adolescence. I
Mhm.
think it's a lot easier, especially with the sort of cultural narratives around like masculinity being bad, like men being bad, and not really having like good or even just like acceptable role models for like a genuinely masculine man in the mainstream culture.
Yeah.
Um, there's something about how this causes boys to get stuck, and sort of reject the idea of like I even need to do anything to become a man.
Right.
Um, and manhood I think is something that you actually do have to step into. Like it's a boy doesn't just become a man by aging. I've never seen it happen. I've seen boys become men by taking on responsibility and cultivating value and like genuinely like expanding their capacity, which is like that's sort of the like intrinsic nature I think of masculinity is there's this like cycle of it's kind of just like you can use like lifting as a metaphor. You
Mhm.
show up in the gym, you're lifting and you're pushing at the edge of your strength, and if you keep doing that consistently for weeks on end, every couple weeks, actually really like every week or two, you're going to be able to lift 5 or 10 pounds heavier, and you're just
Right.
going to keep on progressing, and it's very natural, and it's very consistent, it's very linear, and that's sort of how I think masculine energy, and masculine like coming of age works, is
Mhm.
that when a boy is doing that kind of work like on a spiritual level, he is going to become a man. The growth is going to be undeniable, and that's how masculinity works.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that that reflects too in, like, the tradition of, like, male initiation rituals of, like, being thrust into the woods and, like, having to survive on your own and, like, do your own hunting, like, it does seem to be and I mean, like, there was always, like, sort of like a learning process, right? Like, your childhood was spent learning how to harvest food, how to build shelter, like all of the sort of like survival strategies that we now like sort of commodify, they were built into the life of these people. And so when you would go out on your, like, quest for manhood, it was a cultivation of all you had learned and, like, sort of that final test of your ability to carry that weight of responsibility and, like, self-sufficiency, um, and I think that that's, like, beautiful and needed, and I think it's, like, seems to be, like, what men are really struggling with at the moment is, like, this sort of, like, worth and um, like, what is my purpose feeling, and, like, what am I even supposed to be doing here?
You used the word tested, and I want to kind of key in on that word because I think it's the perfect word to describe what's missing right now. Is we don't have coming of age rituals that test men,
Mhm.
and masculinity that hasn't been tested is almost inherently like unreliable, or you know maybe you would say a little ephemeral. It's not solid. It's not yet real.
Yeah.
um, and there's something about confidence and competency being based in solidity and being based in reality that's kind of undeniable. Like if you're Yeah, I can talk a little bit about my own sort of like journeys with like growth and masculinity here, because for a lot of my life I was like very insecure about a lot of things, and when I was operating from that kind of like place of insecurity, I was basically like in connection with a truthful fact that like I was not as competent and not as high capacity as I needed to be.
Mm.
And the easiest way to build confidence and growth is by actually like doing the work. And when like what you're doing is real, it just completely changes how you feel. And then the internal change of how you feel based on kind of the external work you're doing creates this positive feedback loop. And you keep running that loop, and somewhere at the end of the process you're like, oh, I'm a man. I'm like I have the capacity that I was correctly identifying myself as lacking, and now I don't feel like I'm like incomplete or like not good enough or not a man.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for women, you can have, like, a really similar experience too, like, when integrating the animus, because like, I too had, like, really terrible self-esteem issues, and really
Hmm.
to me, the only solution to self-esteem issues is to, like, do the hard thing, do the thing you don't
Yeah.
wanna do,
Right.
and prove yourself wrong, right? You have to, like, show yourself over and over again that, you're capable of the things that you think you aren't, and then
Yeah.
eventually you'll be, like, self-assured. Um but it's, like, very action oriented. I think for, like, women, the, like, assuming of the healthy feminine seems to be a little bit more on the side of, like, allowing yourself to relax and calm down and know that you will be provided for, and to have a little bit to me, like, it's all about, like, scarcity mindset, right? Like, women who have an unintegrated animus and try to dominate,
Yeah.
they're all living in a fear state. They're, like, afraid that a man's gonna take advantage of them. They're afraid, like, even this narrative about, women who were abused. They're like, "Well,
Mm.
women tolerated abuse for so long because they couldn't get a credit card." And, like, there may be some truth to that, right? But, I don't think
Mm.
that that's, like, entirely true. I don't think that, like, relying on a man financially, it, like, guarantees you to subject yourself to being abused by them.
Hmm.
Um, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, of course.
There's, like,
Mm.
plenty of men who aren't abusive and, like, wouldn't financially abuse you. And,
Yeah.
it requires a lot of discernment to be a relaxed woman and to be a woman who trusts that they will be taken care of, because
Yeah.
you have to choose the right people to be surrounded around, to be surrounded by. Um, but ultimately, the experience of being female and being feminine is one of sort of taking a back seat and allowing things to come to you and not trying to tackle them. So
Yeah.
that seems to be like sort of like the experience of womanhood to me, is finding that state of calmness.
It's sort of like growing into your innate gravity. And
Mhm.
that's I think that's something a lot of women struggle with really hard. And maybe I should say girls struggle with really hard in the modern world, because we really raise women as if they're defective men, and that they should be sort of prioritizing like career climbing and hyper independence. Like that hyper independence specifically is I think a thing that's like incredibly counterproductive and toxic and just like wrong as a thing that we teach girls, because we are not independent creatures. We are fundamentally, spiritually, biologically, any axis you want to use, we are not independent creatures. And if you're, as a woman, focused on your independence, that's going to mean you're blocked off. There's a wall stopping you from receiving.
Mhm.
And this shows up in all sorts of ways, but um, it's, I think, a lot about chivalry and that sort of antiquated notion too of just like men should be generous to women because like that's what men can do easily. And
Right.
that's just the right nature of the world. And it's like, yes, we should be holding doors open for women, just making life easier for them. And that sort of reflects this. I feel an alignment whenever I'm doing things like that, because it just, you can feel it in your like spirit, like deep down. You're like, yeah, it's good to like give things and let them be received like this.
Yeah. I think that's true. I think that's why I don't know, I didn't really understand the and it's funny because I did this. I didn't really understand the sort of, like, women rejecting men's chivalry thing that went on for a while in the 2010s.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know, do you have any, like, sort of idea of what that was about?
Gosh, I mean, it's like where to begin. There's complexities all over the place.
Maybe
So
that's why I can't see it, is because 'cause I'm like,
yeah,
"This is a mess."
yeah. I mean, I think like rejecting chivalry for like some women kind of became a way to like again like flex and demonstrate their like dominance, their independence, their desire for like complete self-reliance.
Mm.
Or not even desire for self-reliance, but just sort of like that's a story that they were affirming with their actions. Um, I think there's also a parallel complexity. There's a nuance here where with all of the cultural energy around like masculine sexual desire being bad and like male desire being like unwanted or harassing and like dangerous, like that caused really quite a lot of boys and men to like repress their like natural and obvious, sexual and romantic desires.
Mhm.
And these suppressed desires, when you suppress something, it doesn't go away, it just kind of like gets redirected or like morphed into something else. And
Yeah.
that's what creates the sort of this like nice guy epidemic, which is when there's all these guys who want to have romantic relationships with a woman or want to have sex with, their girl, like their friends who are girls, but they don't feel like safe expressing anything related to those desires. So
Mm.
they just kind of like do all these like nice things. And I'm putting nice in quotes because it's not actually generous. It's what they're doing. It's like it's nice. It's like there's strings attached to everything. They're doing it with an ulterior motive, and that kind of creates a fundamental like dishonesty and contamination around the actions and the energy. And thinking about like this cultural environment where if you're a woman and you've got, you know, boys and men in your life who are doing this to you, it actually makes a lot of sense to reject that because you don't want to have you don't want to receive nice energy in quotes again that has strings attached to it. Like
Right.
that's not something you want anything to do with. So it makes sense that I think women have gotten a little bit more like, yeah, I'm putting the wall up on that.
Yeah, the assumption becomes they're only doing this to have sex with me,
Yeah.
or yeah, and that's so there's just, like, a general sort of, like, mistrust between both groups. That makes sense to me. Um, I think too, though, there does seem to be, when a woman can't trust, it makes sense that her, like, animus would be sort of, like, out of whack and be in this
Mhm.
place of, like, "Nobody help me. I don't need anybody. Nobody get near me. I can take care of myself," you
Yeah.
know? That expression is, like, so dominance oriented, and yeah, I mean, to me, yeah, it does sound like the issue is, like, trust and honesty, but part of that too is that, like, women have to assume their role of being, like, sort of the muse and being
Mhm.
witnessed and being admired. I've tweeted about this a lot that I think that part of like a woman's accepting of their womanness is like embracing their effect and
Yeah.
accepting that they will have a physical effect on the male. And that's, like, not a bad thing, and you shouldn't, like to shame others, for your effect is, like, in a way, shaming yourself, um, or at least
Mm.
will result in the shaming of that sort of, like, attractiveness out of you, right? It'll be sort of, like, sucked out of you, so
Mm.
maybe we should get back to coming of age cycles. We're going off
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good tangent. I feel like we've gotten a good grasp on like what does it mean to become a man? What does it mean to become a woman?
I think so too.
Um, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are about adulthood and kind of like as an individual, like as a person who is living in the world, was born a baby, grew into a child, grew into an adolescent, has ostensibly become an adult. How do you know when you've reached like adulthood on a spiritual level?
Yeah. I think it's very similar to what we were talking about regarding responsibility and feeling like ready to assume it and also like feeling excited to assume it. I didn't want to take responsibility for my life for a long time. It made me anxious. I didn't feel like I could do it. I felt really like stuck. And ultimately, I had like quite a few like sort of like mental health struggles as a result of it, like feeling
Mm-hmm.
quite anxious and depressed. And um, staying a perma baby, it was the cause of
Mm,
that, um,
yeah,
anxiety, you know?
that's
It was actually because I wasn't assuming the responsibility
right.
that was, creating it, and now, I think I feel like I have, like, sort of just emerged into, like, full adulthood,
Mm,
after, like, a good amount of time of rejecting it and wanting to be sort of, like, taken care of by others. Um, or hoping that some entity would, like, come and take care of me, whether it would be, you know, like, sort of the government or,
mm-hmm.
my parents or, like, my husband. It was like someone could just do it all for me.
Yeah.
Um, and, like, life didn't really just, like, allow that to be the reality, and, there is, like, a level of letting my husband take care of me in a financial way that makes me feel, very, like, feminine and, like, safe, but there is, also, like, a truth that, like, I have to, like, pay back the favor, you know, that, like and I want to pay back the favor, right?
Mhm.
That I, wanna contribute and I wanna feel like I am moving forward as much as he's helping us move forward together.
Mhm.
Um so, yeah, I think to me, like, my, politics, like, really shifted my, when I started to assume more responsibility. It became
Yeah.
less like I wanted to sort of, like, pawn off my, freedom to others so that I didn't have to take responsibility, and instead, I was like, "No, no, 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 I actually love the amount of responsibility I'm required to take because it
Yeah.
allows me to do whatever I want with my life."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think that's a very common shift,
Mhm.
politically, this sort of like axis of responsibility. And it's one of those things that like people kind of believe the story that we're told growing up about like who is responsible for what.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people who really believe like the government is this like wise and all-knowing benevolent entity that can like neutrally and fairly and effectively redistribute all these complicated things about reality in the most perfect and fair way. And I think there's a sort of a grim tragedy to accepting that that's just a story and that it's not true. It's not
Yeah,
even a little bit true.
yeah. And you
But
don't
there's
want
also
that.
freedom.
You don't want that. I know you think you want that, but, like, the
Yeah,
reality is, yeah, like, with responsibility comes freedom,
yeah,
and, like, you that's, like, so beautiful and exciting, and, like, you genuinely get to, like, create the reality that you
yeah.
live within when you have that much freedom.
And part of this realization too is that this is an actual just universal truth about the fundamental nature of reality. Like rejecting responsibility and your obligation to take responsibility doesn't actually free you of it. You can't, you cannot, this isn't like one of those matrix things where you can sort of like walk through the wall and like pause time, bend the bullets, whatever.
Yeah.
No, it's this is a hard truth about reality and you accept it or not at your own peril.
Yeah, and I think it's a good thing, like, I mean, I think that this, like, simulation world was
Mhm.
created, in a particular way to teach us particular things, and I think that hard reality is, like, the thing that teaches us to transcend
Mhm.
ourselves, to say, like, "No, this is a narrative, and I'm being forced to step into a new narrative that, like, responsibility is actually the freedom I seek." Um and that the sort of like allowing others to take care of me is keeping me in a sort of like transactional relationship with them,
Mm,
that I have to constantly owe somebody something.
yeah, so
Mhm.
true. Do you think this sort of cultural environment is contributing to people getting stuck in teenagehood? And I'm also going to say the word adulting to see what kind of a response you have.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you as a borderline Gen Zer, adulting makes me cringe, you know?
Hmm.
Sorry, millennials, but you guys really didn't wanna get out of teenagehood, and I don't blame you, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you guys really had a generational run, um, in, like, the YouTube space. You were doing great. I loved Tweed, you
Yeah.
know, like, I loved Zooey Deschanel.
Something about growing up in the 90s, it was a very charmed time of life, tie-dye t-shirts, fun music, the Red Hot Chili Peppers on the radio.
It's so true. 2000 California, that whole vibe, so good.
Yeah. Video games were fun, movies were still kind of good.
Sure, you guys had Tony Hawk. Like,
We had Tony Hawk.
I can't compete with that. So no, no hate. It's just that adulting is just the experience of being alive, and you should embrace it. I don't think that it's their fault that there's this perpetual teenagehood though. I think that Gen X also really struggled and continues to struggle with the perpetual teenagehood. You could argue boomers still struggle with the perpetual
Mm,
teenagehood, you know, like they really popped off in the 60s. Like you guys really, you created some shit when you were young people. And so I like admire it and I appreciate it. And my generation, maybe not making the best shit as teenagers. Billie
mm.
Eilish is up there. I guess
Yeah, not a coincidence that she was homeschooled, I think.
yeah, right? Isolated,
Well,
stuck
free
with
to pursue like what her gifts are too.
yes, yeah. Anyway, yeah, there seems to be this, like, obsession with teenagehood that I share. I mean, it's a sexy time, you know? Like, everything feels really, really intense, and I
Yeah.
think that, people tend to like chase that feeling of intensity far into adulthood. But I think that they're mistaken. I think that like the responsibility that we're talking about is actually like the weight that people are looking for. And it's
Right.
like there's such reward there. It's just like it's scary, you know?
Yeah. I think when you kind of have this mindset of like adulting is hard, it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. And you start avoiding things that aren't really that hard because it's genuinely not hard to pick up the phone and have a conversation with a stranger. It's not hard to pay a bill or to fill out a form and put it in the mail. These are things that can be and should be pretty trivial. And there is a parallel thing, which you could say, okay, but we live in an incredibly bureaucratic world, and there's more and more sort of anti human systems where you're like stuck for hours, like in phone call menus and things like that, trying to get through to a human to talk about your like healthcare bill or something. But on the base level, adulting is not that hard. And we should kind of embrace like just talking about that in a mature and direct way.
Mhm.
And that if we feed into this idea that these sort of bureaucratic basic life tasks are this impossible responsibility, we're not going to be growing and taking responsibility elegantly. We're not going to be building capacity. And the more you do these things, the easier they get too.
Yeah, I totally agree. It seems to be more about like the mindset around adulting than the actual like experience. It's like,
Yeah.
I think that there seems to be this like lack of acceptance around like what is required of being alive.
Yeah. People
Yeah.
don't want to like pick up their clothes. They don't want to do their laundry. They don't want to like wash their dishes.
Yeah, whereas like if you sort of just like accepted it as part of your reality and were like didn't treat it like an option or like it
Yeah.
shouldn't be there, then
Yeah.
You probably wouldn't be that upset about it. I've been obsessed with this guy. I'll link him in the comments, but he is on Instagram and he just posts videos of him talking to the camera about things that are annoying him. So he'll be like, you know, he's like, this dog is barking in the background of my video and it's really irritating me, but it's only irritating me because I'm imagining a world where the dog isn't barking. But the only reality is that the dog is barking. So if I embrace,
Yeah.
then it becomes not irritating. It just is. Um,
Yeah.
and that seems to be the adulting issue at its most refined.
Yeah, that's a real thing. I think the more you can accept things, the better off you get. I mean, I've been struggling for like quite a while now because I've had this like ongoing plumbing issue in my apartment, which is making the water pressure like a lot lower. So my
Mm.
showers are like low water pressure showers, and like every time I take a shower, I'm just like feeling this like lack of satisfaction in the experience. And I think that creates like a self-fulfilling prophecy of me being in a like bad mood and
Mhm.
like not kind and really just like taking for granted like it's amazing that I have water coming out of pipes at all.
Mhm.
It's amazing that I have a beautiful safe home. There's a lot that I'm taking for granted about my reality when I'm like complaining about my shower.
Totally. You're comparing, like, when you are complaining about your shower, you're comparing it to a reality that maybe other people have in the current moment, which
Yeah.
is high water pressure, hot water. Like, whereas if we're comparing it to a reality of like 200 years ago, you have the sickest shower of all time.
It's insane. It's
Yeah, yeah. That's not to say that it doesn't suck to not have access to, like, a really nice, comfortable shower when you're used to
Mhm.
it. I sympathize. Showers are very important to me.
Yeah.
Um, so in the sort of vein of us talking about infantilization of, and
Mm,
sort of arrested development in teenagehood,
yeah.
so how do you see this sort of, like, arrested development, like what's the cause of this arrested development? Why are we becoming like so sort of like infantilized and avoidant of adulthood?
Man, I think there's something about just like a lack of optimism in general about adulthood and being an adult. Um we don't really have in the school culture, which is the culture that people like spend most of their time in growing up before adulthood. We don't really have a lot of like joy about work. We don't have a lot of joy about taking responsibility. We really have a lot of cultural energy telling people that it's okay to take less and less responsibility and that there's and that actually that's what freedom is that like bucking responsibility is freedom. And I think that's a very kind of an infantile view of what freedom is, because freedom it really relates a lot to commitment and connection and relationships too. We Agency is something people talk about a lot online as well, and this idea of kind of controlling your destiny. And I absolutely believe in free will and agency, but I believe in agency as being something that we do in connection with other people. And I think that this idea of like adulting really is all about um, not wanting to take agency over your life, not wanting to take the responsibility of committing to reality. Yeah,
Yeah, it does seem to be this like misunderstanding of what freedom is.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer that I think maybe I'm not a big believer. I've been thinking a
A
lot
medium
about.
believer.
I'm a media. I don't know if I'm really that attached to anything.
Okay.
um, yeah, anybody can. You can change my mind. Just yeah, I take a little convincing. Um, but I've been thinking a lot about the infantilization of the public and
Hmm.
human domestication, and this idea that like we're sort of in a way domesticating ourselves.
Mm,
Who are we domesticating ourselves to? Probably more like institutions and
mm-hmm.
corporations
Right.
and like groups of people opposed to like one person.
Yeah.
Um, but I
Kind of
do,
like types of authority figures, though, right? Like
yes.
teachers, schools, then the government, corporations. Yeah.
Exactly. There seems to be this like I mean, I think that it's both. They're domesticating us.
Mm-hmm.
We're allowing them to domesticate us or like sort of welcoming it. Although I think that in terms of like adulting, we're sort of like leaning towards asking to be domesticated and domesticating
Mm.
ourselves. Um and I think that that comes up in like a bunch of different like western things. I think that like food is really fascinating to me. It,
Oh,
like
yeah.
the fact I mean, the easiest way to domesticate an animal is to provide them with an abundance of food. Starvation
Yeah.
has decreased extensively. We only 5% of Americans, like, actually go hungry, like, have to skip a meal during the day
Mm-hmm.
to, um like, survive
Yeah.
financially.
And those
So
statistics might not even be real themselves. I'm like, just
and
thinking about it. We have so much food everywhere.
we have so much food everywhere. The census didn't start taking any sort of starvation statistics until the 90s. So
Yeah.
we don't even know what that looked like, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's very possible that like we have a no starvation issue, but we do have like a malnutrition issue in a similar
Yeah.
way to like farm fed meat has a malnutrition issue where it's
Yeah.
like there you have enough calories, right? We have an obesity problem in the US,
Right.
but, the quality of the calories is, like, super low. So it, like, kills your brain, makes you, unable to think for
Yep.
yourself, makes you
Low energy.
fat and lazy, and, like, I mean, it's just yeah, it's a difficult, uh, experience that I think the public is facing where they're like, "I this is all I can afford, and it's terrible for me and it like totally screws up my independence, like
Hmm.
that is its own form of domestication. Um, there's a bunch of others I could talk about, but
Well, just on that thread of food alone, like when you said the word food, my like eyes lit up because I was thinking about like DoorDash specifically. And I'm
oh,
like, oh yeah, like there is such a big difference between kind of like being this passive consumer that like summons food to be delivered to you versus like cooking your own dinner.
so real.
And that is like that's very domestication coded.
Yeah.
And it's like people have these like really weird complexes around DoorDash where they'll kind of like pretend like it's an economical thing or like a money saving thing, and I'm like, there is no world in which you can tell me that um ordering restaurant and fast food takeout on a delivery service is cheaper than cooking or that it's healthier than cooking. It's You're
No,
crazy if you think that.
no, it's just not, it's like just not true.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to like Costco or something. Like,
Yeah.
trust me, I lived in LA and was not making enough money to be living in LA. I figured out how to cook all my own food there. I didn't order DoorDash at all. Like, it's
Yeah.
just true. But there's that, there's food, and then there's also like, outsourcing of like thought, right?
Yeah.
There's like freaking reels and I mean even Twitter. I think a lot of people just like repeat what they hear. Or like there's sort of like no validity to what you think unless you've like
Hmm.
read it in a book or you have a reference. And
Right. The
um
worship of kind of data and the secular liberal enlightenment mindset. Everything has to be like academic and respectable.
yes, nothing can come from like contemplation or like intuition or like just like playing with thought with another person. And
Yeah.
um yeah, that I to me, like, that's actually, like, very, uh, infantilizing that, like
Yeah.
sure, like, I think it's great to have sources. I read a lot, like, I love working with other people's ideas, but only regurgitating what you've read or what you've listened to is not, having your own thought, and that's
Yeah.
not actually taking responsibility for your own opinions.
Absolutely. And we also live in a time where like data is cooked. Like let's call it like it is. There are probably, off the top of my head, like 10,000 hyper politicized think tanks in America, each of which is well funded to produce specific partisan data that confirms the ideological beliefs of its funding class. And this is a pattern we see in university research too. Like universities and professors tend to research the type of things that are going to get results that fit the dominant worldview.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be the guy who like finds that there's basically like no way to rehabilitate a criminal to be a productive member of society. Like that's going to make you very unpopular in the faculty club.
Yeah.
You're not going to be invited to the hangouts.
No, no. Yeah. I mean, there's real social consequences to it. But again, like if I'm thinking about human domestication, like that's a big thing too. It's like you don't want to be a cattle in the
Mm,
pen, like rejected, like it's a lot easier,
yeah.
in some ways to like maintain independence if you're like a feral pig,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just like running free. So I think there's a balance between those things when it comes to humans. Like we're pack oriented. Um, but this sort of like globalization seems to be like very like sort of aligned with the infantilization of the public. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that being infantilized benefits a lot of people. I think that it makes us a lot easier to control if we're sort of just like being fed what we think and being fed what we eat, um,
Yeah.
and how it makes us feel. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits to us being sort of like just on the
Yeah.
receiving end.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this podcast and thinking about like, oh God, am I being domesticated? Like the way out is to raise your standards. Like don't let people talk down to you. Don't let people feed you slop that's bad for you. Like you are a human. You have a divine spark inside of you. You're a beautiful soul, one of one, truly unique. Raise your fucking standards.
Yeah. And I would also say like don't panic, like
And don't panic.
don't panic. There are like tons of people who are not accepting this sort of like domestication. Like don't to me like the worst thing you can do is get like super ungrounded and like freak out and like go like change everything about your life and buy a bunch of new stuff. Like you don't need to do any of that.
Yeah.
Like just look up grass-fed beef, and like also like maybe some cooking, maybe not even that, you don't
Yeah.
even need to go that far. You can just like start cooking for yourself. Cooking for
Yeah.
yourself is a great way to stop yourself from becoming domesticated. Just see
Yeah.
what you're relying on and see if you can become a little less reliant on those things.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to use your discernment and taste to improve your life, and this is going to create good compounding effects. Like when you
Mhm.
eat healthy, you're going to feel healthy. There's a huge difference between food that exists to like satiate your taste buds and food that exists to like supply energy and nourishment to your body. Like food that tastes good versus food that makes you actually feel good.
Right.
And we have a lot of food that makes you that we have a lot of food that tastes good because we're extremely good at engineering new chemicals and funny things that really like hit the brain like crack.
Yeah, dude. And you don't have to hate yourself for liking it either. Like
Right.
I'm going on a road trip on Friday and sure as hell I'm going to get McDonald's,
Yeah.
Like
That's American birthright right there.
yeah, it is the American birthright. I don't eat McDonald's all the time. I cook for myself for the most part, but like I'm just not like strict in that way. I think
Hmm.
that becoming like sort of like enslaved by any mentality is like a recipe for disaster.
Hmm. On this note of on this theme rather of human domestication, I'm curious if you have any thoughts about like dating and romance and how people are kind of being domesticated sexually.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're being low key neutered.
Mm.
Um, people like sort of like psychologically neutered
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. Either that or they're being like sort of like jerked off by a robot, i.e., porn. You know?
Yeah.
uh,
That's a great way to frame it. You're being psychically jerked off by a demonic robot.
yeah, yeah. It's not great. I mean, I think too, as Matt knows, I've been encouraging we've both been really, propagandizing
Hmm.
a feral summer.
Yeah.
Um, and, I think that I'm really pro people being able to, like, smell each other and being able to,
Mm.
like, get into, like, a more, like, primal you don't have to stink all the time, by the way,
Yeah.
but, like, having a little bit of an opportunity to, like, smell each other, like, if it's, like, coming back from the gym or something,
Yeah.
um, then I think that there's, like, something beautiful about, like, tapping into the primal of connecting, and yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of birth control, for for these same, like, sort of, like, neutering
Yeah.
reasons. I think there's, like, other ways that we can not get pregnant.
Right.
Um, but yeah, what were you thinking? I feel like you were leading me somewhere, and I might have not taken you there.
Well, no, I mean, I it was an open-ended question. There is, I was thinking a little bit about like dating apps though, and like the
Oh,
mentality around dating too, because people do have, it seems like, this very passive mindset around dating, where it's like it has to be the most frictionless delivery mechanism possible. And like that's really what dating apps are. It's like this is a frictionless way to like date and to like do romance and have sex. Um it's sort of like the closest thing you could get to like a DoorDash for human companionship, right?
yeah, yeah, whereas, like, even birds I have a lot of birds around my property, and we've been, like, putting out bird seed, and so I, like, have been watching the birds a lot lately, and, like, they, like, fight before like, when they're, like, sort of, like, pursuing each other, they're, like, always fighting and, like,
Mhm.
getting close to each other and, like, chasing each other and things like that,
Yeah.
and, like, none of that happens when you're on an app. You're just sort of like, "We do this? Good." And then, like, that's not how any animal sort of, like,
Yeah.
finds each other.
It's not a physical thing. It's also not like a socially contextual thing. When you think about it, it's like it's really unnatural to like meet people with no social context
Yeah,
and like consider them romantically. And it's kind of like, is the story this person is telling me about like themselves and their life even like remotely true? Like it
right.
might be. They might have like a good job and a good life and a good, set of relationships, or they might be like a complete lunatic psycho.
Yeah.
There's just no way of knowing when you don't have social context.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe that's, like, not the best thing for specifically a romantic relationship. You I have mixed feelings about this mostly because 'cause I'm thinking about Twitter, and I
Hmm.
do think that, like, Twitter is a great dating app.
Yeah.
Um And they have there's this, like, sort of, like, funny thing that happens where people 'cause that could be the truth of the Twitter people too. This was my anxiety when I was, like,
Mm.
meeting my first mutual, was I was like, "What if I'm gonna get catfished?" But, like,
Hmm.
they were anonymous, so, like, couldn't really catfish me in, like, the really
Yeah.
specific sense. But more like, what if this person isn't who they say they are?
Yeah.
And, I I don't know. So, I mean, like, I feel like I so, like, enjoy and getting to know people who I meet online that I have, like, mixed feelings about it, about, like, meeting people online. It's the, like, sort of building a relationship through the phone thing that feels a
Yeah.
little iffy to me, and also the, like, lottery sort of, like, slot machine way in which people are picking partners. Because what's
Hmm.
great about Twitter as a dating app is that a lot of the people are anonymous, and so you, like, can't see their physical,
Hmm.
and you get to, like, do this, like, enjoying their thoughts sort
Yeah.
of dance, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot about Twitter that makes it kind of uniquely good as a dating app. And I mean, part of that is just the fact that it's not at all trying to be a dating app.
Right.
It's like it's a public diary app almost. It's like you can share your unfiltered thoughts with the world. It reflects what you're thinking about and what your values are, and in a way that, like, if you're posting honestly, it makes you like very legible to other people, and like people who
Yes.
are attracted to you are going to respond to that. And it's also I would say like high volume of like low stakes interactions is really important. It lets people build rapport. It lets people build trust and connection. I mean, we met online. We met through Twitter. We've never actually met face to face yet, although I know that will change someday.
Sad.
And you know, it's funny because like I don't remember like how we met online, or like I think it's kind of just like at some point we started reading each other's work and kind of appreciating each other's thoughts and supporting each other, and, you know, making small comments here and there. And we were kind of like, yeah, like, you know, we just resonate with each other's energy.
Yeah.
It was all like very, very organic, I think, not like intentional almost.
Absolutely. I actually, so I don't remember us like interacting for the first time, but I do remember the first time that we DM'd
Mm,
because we were put in a group chat by our lovely mutual Lapis
mm.
Lagoons.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
but see, like, so coincidental and lovely, like, somebody else put us in a group chat together, and then, like, we became friends and made a podcast, so,
that's real.
you
Yeah.
know, that's how it like, that's how romance also happens in, like, the real life too.
Yeah.
Not that Matt and I are romantically involved, simply that, like, there's, like, this lovely, like, meeting of
Yeah.
people through other people and, like, meshing networks, and then, like, you have a friend or you have, like, a romantic interest or, you know, you have an enemy, maybe, um, maybe you find an enemy,
Yeah.
but
Enemies to
yeah.
lovers is always fun.
Well, there's yeah, maybe that happens to you. But, you know, this, like, sort of, like, connecting through other people's networks, opposed to just, like, these one-to-one
Yeah.
interactions that are happening on, like, Tinder or Hinge.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. That was a good tangent that
Yeah,
I led us down about human domestication and like dating and romance and dating apps.
yeah. It was
Um returning now to sort of arrested development, extended adolescence. I want to talk about our lives and kind of what benefits we've had from rejecting the cultural mainstream narrative around infantilization. Like what are some of the benefits of like really taking responsibility?
well, I think the big one for me is that I ended up with a very responsible partner.
Mm.
Um, Responsible people don't really wanna hang out with irresponsible people for the most part.
Yeah, yeah, that's real.
You know, like, it may be, like, fun every once in a while, but it's, like, to them, like, sort of obstructing their routine often or,
Yeah.
um,
And it's
you know
draining. It's a drain.
yes, it's just intense and, like, maybe just not for them. And it doesn't especially if you are looking to be with somebody in, like, a intimate, committed relationship, it's really hard to put a responsible person with an irresponsible person. It's
Yeah.
just their priorities are really different. Um, so to me, the big thing that responsibility brought me was a very responsible husband who is just so good at taking care of things.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I think when women complain a lot about being with a
Mhm.
man that like doesn't do the things without them asking, like a lot of times there's like sort of like a misalignment of
Mhm.
responsibility. And yeah, I mean, so yeah, it brought me love. That's huge.
Yeah.
um,
I mean,
yeah,
is there anything better in life than like a happy committed marriage? Talk
I
about that.
brother,
But
I know.
keep in mind, I am single, so don't make me feel bad on air.
I okay, yeah, no, I mean, I try not to brag. I really do. Like, it's hard not to. But I also spent a long portion of my life being in like terrible relationships.
Yeah.
And also a good amount of my relationship with my husband being like sort of miserable of my own making because I was anxious and scared he was going to leave me and like just in a panicked state. So we can torture ourselves even if we're in a great relationship too.
Mhm.
Um and yeah, it's not always just about the person and being with a great person. Sometimes we can ruin it for ourselves.
Yeah.
Um but that's what responsibility brought me. I think it's also brought me a lot of self-esteem, like we were talking about earlier. I like just feel like if I feel like I can figure anything out in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. It's like nothing is I'm a decently smart human. There seems to be like nothing that if I didn't spend enough time trying to figure it out that I couldn't figure out. Um and that doesn't mean that I'm like ready to do any job at any time. It just means that like I'm not afraid of pursuit
Yeah.
anymore. And that feels really assuring and like hopeful.
There's something about that self trust in your capacity, and it's yeah, like genuine confidence in your own abilities, and that's how you create. That's how you get from insecure to secure. And I'm glad you sort of had that arc, with your husband where you became more secure in the relationship, and it just kept blossoming and becoming better and better.
Thank you. Tell me about your feelings of responsibility.
Yeah, I think there's a really big shift that happens when a man takes responsibility, especially. It like changes how you feel about yourself. It changes how you show up in the world, which changes how other people feel about you. Um, a lot of things that I've taken responsibility for are about my energy, how I sort of like what things I focus on. Like, am I focusing on negative things? Am I complaining a lot about things I don't control? Or am I like celebrating things that I like and, people I love and things that are within my sphere of influence? Um, there's a kind of radical like rejection I undertook for myself of like the mainstream culture, and basically said, I'm not going to let my values and value hierarchy be determined by other people, especially people who don't understand me or have my best interests at heart. Um, and part of taking responsibility for me too also just looked, it was like a very physical thing. It's like I quit alcohol, I quit drugs, I started exercising regularly, and like changing my relationship with myself by taking better care of my body and like cooking for myself more. um that like really created like just a lot of expansion for me. It's like it makes me feel happy, healthy, and like also like really expanded my world of dating, which is nice.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think that taking responsibility, everyone thinks that it's going to like restrict them. And in reality, it like seems to open a lot of doors to a lot of new places.
So many doors. Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
there's girls like I could ask out who would like love to get dinner with me, who like I would have never felt confident to ask out 5
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah. I mean, it's so beautiful. Like, I mean, I wasn't sure I wanted to get married for a long time. And then like that became an option to me because it was like, oh, I'm with someone I like could see myself marrying and like could want to marry. Um and I also like, I mean at like base level, like life could have like sort of like stopped for me in like a literal sense, but it also like in a just like a sense of stagnation.
Hmm.
Like I think when we take on more responsibility and we're sort of in this state of like let me show you what I can do, or like let's let God like show me what I'm capable of by
Yeah.
taking on more responsibility, then like suddenly we enter like a new reality, right? And then we can like keep doing that. We can keep leveling up into, like, a new reality until we reach this place where we're like, "Wow, I've cultivated a lot of wisdom. Um, maybe I wanna park here. Maybe this is where I need to stay."
Yeah, you get to a point of like life feels like kind of easeful and abundant, and
Mhm.
that's a really good thing. I think the universe is always going to like disrupt any routine and any comfort at some point, just as a sort of like energetic check and a way to like keep forcing us to grow.
Yeah.
But those levels that you go through are so real, and like I spent so much of my life just kind of like making like beginner level mistakes again and again,
Yeah.
and once I stopped doing that, it actually like really just like made my life so much better. I took Once I was taking responsibility for like, my decisions on a higher level. Like intermediate level mistakes do exist, but they're like rarer and often less catastrophic than, repeatedly making simple mistakes. So
Yeah, at least
if
psychologically,
yeah,
you
it's like
know?
if you know you have a problem with something, or like something's not in alignment with where you want to go, like stop doing that thing. Like just do it.
Yeah.
Believe. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's just so painful to be in the same place. It's like to me,
Yeah.
like, that's, like, the greatest suffering is to
Right.
be stuck in something, but it's just because it's fear. You're just, like, feeling fear layered and layered and layered. It's like, "I haven't faced it, I haven't faced it, I haven't faced it." And then you gotta, like, punch through all of those layers, whereas if you just, like, were to face it the first time,
Hmm.
you'd discover that, like, it's not that serious, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Mm.
There's something about our cultural messages around responsibility too, that really like bother me a lot, because you hear so often these messages that are kind of like keep your options open, or like you have time, and it's all those kinds of messages are really like on the deepest level telling you to not take responsibility.
Yeah.
Um, I was told when I was in college, like explore classes, like you don't have to pick a major until the end of your sophomore year, like just like have fun, explore. And that was such bad advice. Like the best advice possible, I think, is to like pick something you think you might be interested, commit to it hard, start going deeper into it, and you'll find out if it's not right for you quicker. Um, the best thing you can do is commit to things, and the best thing you can do for your present and future life is to live like your time is scarce and valuable, not in a fear-based way, but in a just kind of a, clear and accepting of reality way, because we time is the one thing that we cannot buy more of.
Mhm.
We It's the easiest thing in the world to take for granted.
Yeah. And it does seem like a big part of that is not just, like, committing to the thing, but, like, committing to the self. Um, People seem, like, very resistant to committing to themselves. I at least find it, like, a little bit harder to commit to the self than to commit to others. Like, um, I recently quit my job and I'm, like, doing creative work for myself, pretty much exclusively, and, um it's wonderful, but also, like, my day to day is, like, completely orbiting around me and how I schedule my routine, and so, like, if I were required to show up for somebody, I can do that. Like, I can
Yeah.
be there on time, and I can, like, crush it, and I will be prepared. I can do all of that. It's the, like, showing up for what I've scheduled for myself and not going, I can do that tomorrow. I can do that another time." That
Yeah.
seems to be quite difficult for me. And that to me is like vital. Like that to longevity at least. That's vital because otherwise you're
Yeah.
just going to remain reliant on others to keep you motivated.
Hmm.
And then there might be things that you really want to do that you can't do because they require self-reliance and self-commitment and you're avoiding it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm looking at our notes and I see the words the body, the mind, the caretaker. Does that mean
Mm.
anything to you?
Oh god, what did I mean by that?
I wanted to say it out loud because I like it. The body, the mind, the caretaker. Um,
Oh. Oh, I like it too.
maybe that's all that
Um,
needs to be said.
yeah, I mean, maybe I meant accepting responsibility for one's body,
Mhm.
one's mind, and also for others.
Mm.
Like, learning to become a caretaker of oneself and also other human beings. Like, I
Yeah.
see this often with community. People seem to, like, not wanna do things for their friends for free,
Hmm.
um, and but also, like, complain that they don't have community, and that
Right.
there's, like, this inherent, like, caretaking that has to happen and, like, a mutual caretaking that has to happen for community
Yeah.
to, like, grow,
Yeah.
um, and part of that's taking responsibility for the fact that you're gonna have a loss sometimes. Like, you're
Right.
gonna lose time to somebody else. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
so
there's something about like one of the things people like about a community is it makes them feel valuable. But you have to be like willing to actually do valuable things for others if you want to to have that feeling. And I think that's something that's been lost a little bit culturally too.
yeah, I
Hmm.
think so too. The body, the mind, the caretaker. I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm gonna tweet it.
Yeah, it's there's something there. It's kind of poetic. It could be a book or something too. It's
Mm,
evocative.
it's
Hmm.
sweet. I like it.
Hmm.
Ah, makes me feel
Okay.
soft.
Okay. So yeah, family dynamics, hierarchical structures. How does this sort of fit into the conversation we've been having about coming of age and the sort of different archetypes of the human life cycle?
Sure. So to me, like the family is like the ultimate test. Once you're like in adulthood, it's just like you're like once you've assumed personal responsibility, to me, like the remaining challenge is often coming like from the family.
Mm-hmm.
Um and uh the family structure like is like pretty hierarchical, right? Like there are tiers of generations that exist. Everybody sort of like agrees to particular roles in that system. And then throughout the life cycle, the system sort of shifts dramatically, right? Like a generation starts to disappear. Everybody starts changing roles as a result of aging. So there's sort of this like constant shifting where people have to like assume different positions in the family.
Yeah.
Um, and so to me, like the coming of age that occurs in adulthood multiple times, like comes as a result of those familial shifts.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And what do you think about sort of the hierarchical structures of families? I'm thinking a little bit about like, in my own family, um, there's been really like different roles inhabited by different people at different times. It's sort of interesting to think like looking back, my dad, um, when we were younger, my dad was like very career driven and very like focused on um just kind of like operating within that space and providing for the family. And then I think there got to be a point where maybe he had just sort of hit like this critical threshold of like feeling abundance, and he didn't suddenly have to like work as hard to like provide for us, and his role shifted into just spending more time and more energy on the family and the home. um and there's something about like the willingness, I think, to recognize when you have enough of a certain thing that like enabled that role shift.
Totally.
um
Yeah,
yeah.
I think retirement can be, like, a huge one, especially for men,
Mm,
um, where you're sort of, like, connecting with purpose and drive and where it comes from. If you've spent a lot of your life, cultivating money and
yeah.
that's been your purpose is like being a provider, and then you have provided such an abundance that you no longer need to like go seek it out anymore, then like you kind of have to recalibrate your priorities and figure out a new purpose. Um, and I think some people take to it by being like, "Oh, I get to do the things that I always wanted to do and like become achieve things that I had always
Hmm.
sought to achieve that weren't financially viable." And then I think some people regress and sort of
Hmm.
re uh, re um, resurrect their teenage self and find that lack of responsibility again, right? Where there are no consequences now because I've provided everything that I need to provide, and I can just, like, sit around and play video games all day if I want,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah, it's a very interesting split that can happen there.
Mhm.
I'm thinking also about this idea of like the family as kind of like a sort of like, microscopic cell of like a society at whole or like a civilization at whole. Because a family is it's obviously connected to society. It's connected to life. Like families sort of, definitionally are about people coming together in relationships. Almost off, frequently they're about reproducing and having kids and passing life on. Um, and at the same time, it's also like an insulated unit
Mhm.
from the outside world. Like every family is different. Every family is unique. The energy dynamics there are unique. Do you have any like just thoughts or resonance with this way of looking at family?
Yeah, I think of families often as, like, more like an individual kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's to me, like, how I sort of, like, structure the hierarchy in my mind. Sometimes that comes out of, like, age or, like, it's sort of, like, assumed out of age, right? Like, you think of, your, like, eldest grandfather as, like, the patriarch of the family, but, I think often spiritually, people don't assume those roles. So sometimes you end up in this, like, tricky dynamic where there's, like, a secret leader where, like, you pretend like your eldest grandfather is or your the eldest man in the family is the king, but really somebody else is sort of, like, running the show.
Yeah.
Um Other times, I think that there, like, tends to be, like, battles between, children and adults because the child may be more, like, spiritually mature and ready to lead the family, and they want to assume it, but their parent may see the position as, like, a seniority given, position opposed to, like, something that one earns. Um, so which, like, in a traditional monarchy would be the truth, right? There's sort of like this seniority thing that occurs, and so I don't think that the spirituality I think that a family can be easily misguided by a leader that didn't earn it, or doesn't, like, want to be the leader, but just sort of, like, was given it, as like, circumstantially. So, yeah, that's kind of how I think of the hierarchy is through more of like a monarchy.
Yeah, there's something about like a successful, and a thriving family as being one where people are like taking responsibility for their roles and embracing the responsibility of what the family needs. And I think there's a lot more fluidity of those roles in the modern world because like you said, it's possible that like a guy in his late 20s could sort of spiritually be the elder in an extended family network. It's possible that a woman in her 70s is like the provider financially for a family. There's just a lot of different things that could be happening. But you use the word hierarchy a lot, and that's an interesting word to me because it kind of implies like roles and authority.
Mhm,
And I think that there's something powerful about hierarchy as like a reality based way of organizing things. Um, a good hierarchy is going to give people clarity about what they need to do and why they're doing it and why like it should be them instead of someone else. And
Right.
a bad hierarchy, or the alternative of bad hierarchy is like no hierarchy. Like everyone has just like no boundaries between like their roles and their responsibilities and everyone else's. And that becomes very chaotic quickly. Um,
Either
do you
that
have
or it sort of dissolves, right? Because like, I
Yeah.
think that there's a lot of people who just don't see their family as a unit. They see a group of individuals who are forced to come together every holiday, and, like, they don't see, like, the sort of, like, shared abundance, and they don't treat their family like a business. Like, I very much, like, feel just as a result of, like, having been raised by 2 entrepreneurs, I think we, like, see our family as, like, quite a business
Hmm.
that, like, we all sort of, like, help each other. Um, Sometimes that doesn't, like for me, that didn't, like, totally work out with the family system I was born into, but I definitely, like, carry that into the family system that I'm now, um married into, that I really would like to, like, contribute to the pot, right?
Hmm.
That, like, we're all sort of helping each other elevate.
Hmm. So is that kind of what like a family as a running the family as a business means to you? It's like a little bit about like growth and shared contribution.
Yes. I mean, like, there's the financial aspect of that, but I think that there can be, like, the spiritual business too of, like, how can we elevate from a, like, sort of consciousness state? Like, how do we all become better people simply by
Right.
being together and assuming the roles that we are best suited for?
Hmm. Beautiful.
Um I guess how do you view the hierarchy of a family as, like, sort of crucial to its success?
Yeah, I think hierarchy kind of informs what everyone's going to be doing in a way that creates alignment and growth and like safety and kind of that sense of safety and protection I think is very important in a family. Like a healthy family, the children are protected from the outside world. The elders are protected from the outside world. Everyone is better off together than they would be alone. And there's sacrifice that comes with that too. It's not pure pure upside. It's not always easy. Um, but hierarchy by kind of creating structure I think lets people focus on the right kind of things. It also
Mhm,
makes it possible for people to really specialize in their responsibilities. And I think this is sort of like the old world knowledge of just like the sort of biological and spiritual like realities of like masculinity and femininity. We had a lot more of an emphasis on what the different sexes bring to the table that's unique.
mhm,
And I think there are certain aspects of masculinity that are more suited to certain things. There are certain aspects of femininity that are better suited to certain things. And when we embrace that, um, there's just like you're kind of like moving with the currents instead of like moving against the resistance of your own nature.
mhm,
Um, so I think hierarchy can be a way to inform that too. It can be a way to kind of like orient men towards providing and kind of doing that sort of compound growth that we were talking about, where it's like you're taking on more responsibility and creating more value and really like creating abundance for everyone else. And, the sort of like matriarchal side of things is about nurturing and distributing the resources like efficiently and fairly within the family and thinking about the big picture of like what is being created within this family, what kind of life is going to grow out of this.
Absolutely. Yeah, it seems to, like, bring quite a bit of clarity to people about what they're supposed to be doing and how they can be beneficial, and I think when we don't have that clarity, then we just, like, either tend to go into the self or we sort of, like, flounder and panic, um, and, like, yeah, I mean, I think somebody has to, like, assume the responsibility of keeping families together, and designating roles, I think, is sort of, like, helpful in that, and, like, you don't have to directly tell your family members, like, who they are to you, but I think we sort of, like, naturally assume roles when that sort of, like, shift happens in power, um, and, uh, yeah, I mean, to me, that seems to be too part of, like, the commitment thing that we were talking about, where you, like, really commit to your role and how you can be helpful, and, one of the ways that we sort of, like, go through a coming of age in adulthood is when we've really assumed a role, and then a massive shift happens in the family, and we're forced to assume a new role that gives us a different vision of who we are and what we're capable of.
Yeah, that's very real when that
Yeah.
happens. And
Yeah.
I haven't experienced a ton of that within my own family life. Not so much since I think like kind of the journey from adolescence um to adulthood, but I do feel that kind of looming shift that's going to occur when, you know, one of my parents passes away. That's
Yeah.
going to be there's going to be a lot of responsibilities that fall to me and that I assume when that happens.
Yeah. It recently happened to my husband's family where very much their, patriarch their patriarch passed in March, and now there seems to be a bit of a shift and a shuffle around, like, where the leadership lies, who's gonna make sure everybody sticks together, like, yeah, there's reorganizing that has to happen, when tragedy strikes and when, a generation that used to lead is no longer available to us, and, I think about this too, somebody on Twitter who I really like, their father passed away recently, and, they've just been posting about the experience of having
Mm,
their father pass, um, and it's just has me thinking about the ways in which life sort of ushers us into these new roles. And, often when someone is dying, witnessing them die and having to assume the role of their caretaker, uh, maybe somebody who, in the circumstance of a parent, somebody who once took care of us and, you know,
yeah.
changed our diapers and fed us, we may now take on that role for them, and have to assume the role of parenting our parents, and how that can be like a quite initiatory process.
What do you think about this sort of idea of like the role of the elder in the modern world? And I don't know if you feel the same way, but it seems like there's kind of a lot of rejection, maybe. Like people are like rejecting that role of elder. We were talking earlier about generations and Generation X, you know, Gen X. They don't really seem like a generation that's stepping into the elder role at all. They kind of seem detached and pretty like ironic, maybe a little bit nihilistic about things, jaded. There's some sort of like self mythologization of like being the like last cool and free generation before like the therapy brained millennials took over with our extreme infantilization and lack of responsibility, which you know is valid. It's like if I was if I was older than I am and was looking at the millennial generation, I would be like, okay, guys, like let's get a little perspective here.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, in
But
fairness, you guys were doomed from the start. They started calling you, like, entitled and infantilized when you were, like, 20, which is, like, the time to be entitled and infantilized. But
yeah, yeah, it's
you know?
true. And there was, I think, like a catastrophic cultural coddling of millennials specifically. Like this is something that began with Gen X, like as a point of clarity, like the general lowering of standards objectively in like schools and this kind of idea of like the self-esteem movement and um just sort of like, yeah, I don't know, the like marshmallow gloves, touching everything in the softest way, like not letting there be any sharp corners to reality.
Helicopter parenting?
Yeah, helicopter parenting. All of those things began, following boomers. But there is definitely an element where millennials like experienced it on a much vaster scale.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of caused a lot of millennials to have like really tortured relationships to either the idea of authority, the idea of freedom, the idea of responsibility. Because if you've never been allowed to take responsibility for yourself, um, there's this thing that can happen where you don't even know that like you actually have the power to do it for yourself. Like you don't need to accept somebody else's frame that they are your authority figure or that they are your provider and that they are your like moral superior or whatever. Um, you don't have to accept care that this is sort of like the nice guy thing we were talking about earlier. You don't
Yeah.
have to accept things that have strings attached that you don't want to,
Yeah.
but you do have to have that realization that that's what's going on. And a lot of people have a really tough time with that realization because it's a little bit of a cold realization, I think. People don't feel the warmth of it, which is there. There is warmth to it, but it's hidden.
Yeah. It, like, takes a little bit of digging, you know? So why do you think that, Gen X is rejecting the role of the elder?
I think they don't have maybe like it's a lack of like just a cultural through line or something, a lack of of wanting to take responsibility. Um Something about it just feels like they're detached and withdrawn. And I think that this is a reaction to like growing up in like a pretty cynical and nihilistic and like morally relativistic media period. Like all of the like songs of Gen X youth is a lot about like fighting authority, like nobody there's like no one higher than you, and it's kind of a total like it's the romanticization of freedom as a lack of responsibility. I think
Mhm.
like that message like really hit Gen X growing up. And so I see Gen X as like being this generation that feels like they don't owe anyone anything and they kind of live and act in a way that reflects that. I
Yeah.
think the elder role is like fundamentally about caring really deeply about the generations and the people that come after you. And somebody who doesn't take that responsibility is not going to be able to assume the elder role.
Yeah. Yeah. I have mixed feelings about, like, why Gen X did what they did in terms of, like, because I can really only, like, look at them through media because 'cause I'm such a music head. I'm, like, a
Hmm.
movie nerd, and, like, it does seem to be, like, quite a reaction from, like, the '80s, where like music in particular was like very overly joyful and like sort of rose colored glasses. And they grew up with parents who were from the '60s who were all like sort of like free love. And then they seemed like really bitter and angry, maybe for political reasons. But I like don't really know enough about the time period to, like, understand why it happened, like, so across the board. Um, what I will say is that I don't see a whole lot of, like, spiritual inclination with Gen X. Like, they don't
Yeah.
seem very, at least, like, boomers, I think boomers can be, like, a little bit, like, self-centered, but I think that they were really interested in spirituality, like, they brought Eastern spirituality to the West, and, I I mean, I'm that's the reason why I'm a spiritualist, is because I have access to that information, and because of that movement. They were excited about their connection to God and meditation, and they were quite a religious generation. Maybe not in the traditional sense, but they were interested in spirituality and religion, like, beyond Christianity. And Gen X seems like sort of like not interested in the spiritual, generally speaking. And so I think it's, like, very difficult to assume the role of the elder if you aren't interested in the spiritual, because it's, like, to me, like, an entirely spiritual role. Um,
Yeah.
you're basically just, like, taking all of the lessons that you've learned from life and becoming a mentor to young people. Your body is deteriorating as an elder, so you're not, like, useful in, like, a labor sense. So you may be, like, passing on wisdom, but you're not, like, showing how to, you're not showing someone how to, like, go hunt, because you can't physically go on the journey with them, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot of, like, physical limitations, and so the role of the elder is, like, really to, like, commune with your impending death and, accept it and become curious about it, and then allow that sort of, like, acceptance to be a guiding light for young people. Um, so yeah, I just think it's hard if you haven't spent your life. I think it's hard for anybody who hasn't spent their life sort of, like, walking with the spiritual to, like, become an elder and, like, really assume that role in a useful way.
Do you think there's like a passing of the torch thing here, too, where it's like, yeah, when you're assuming the role of elder, that sort of like comes with a deliberate embrace of the fact that you are, in some ways, passing a torch. You are
Yeah,
like removing yourself from the physical doing or the sort of like status hierarchy, like climbing in games and striving that happens in like, your typical career. Um, and thinking back to Gen X too, to some extent, Gen X, I think, didn't really get past the torch also.
yeah,
There's that I think there's kind of a like it's a double side, like it's happening on both sides. It's like Gen X doesn't really want to like be an elder and embrace the mentor role to younger generations, but they also weren't really trusted with a lot. And I think a lot of them kind of have like floated into these sort of like middle management type careers where it's like you're sort of materially prosperous but sort of like spiritually you don't have a lot of freedom, you don't have a lot of autonomy, you're kind of like trapped within a monolithic system that feels pretty stifling. And yeah, I think that's kind of, it's like nobody is handing Gen X the torch, like nobody's giving them the invitation to embrace that role either.
absolutely. I mean, like, look at our government. We have so many boomers, like, still in
Yeah.
office. And that's one of my, like, greatest frustrations with the boomer generation, is this, like, refusal to, release the cultural hold that they have. Um and this, like, refusal to pass power, to somebody else. And I think it's, like, totally selfish and, like, not paying attention to the the reality that, like, they won't be here at some point, and that, uh, we will have to live with the world that they give us, without any sort of, like, shepherding. Um, yeah, I think it's to me, that's, like, a huge problem, because many of us who are, like, I'm reaching my 30s, you're in your 30s, like, people within your generation are in their 40s, and they still don't feel like they have any say over, like, what this world is, um,
Yeah.
because a very old generation who has lived longer than, like, many other generations and, like, seems to be and also is huge. They're a giant generation. Um, they're still sort of calling the shots. And so I think that there's gonna be, like, quite a reckoning that happens over the next, like, 10 or 20 years where the younger generations maybe Gen X will be required to step up, or maybe the millennials will just say, "No, we're just gonna bypass you guys. You haven't taken the torch.
Yeah.
We're gonna do it."
I think it's kind of natural for like some generations to be a little more impactful and have more opportunities to exert influence than others as well.
For sure.
And like Gen X really grew up in a time of just like that sort of like mid institutional collapse where institutions that had been functioning for like decades, centuries even, um, were like still running good enough that the cracks weren't really beginning to show. There wasn't a lot of opportunity to like supersede the authority of experts or institutions because like nobody was doing that and nobody was questioning that. And then you look at millennials, you look at Gen Z, you look at people who grew up during COVID. Those people are going to have a radically different relationship to authority. They're going to have a radically different relationship to politicians. They're going to have a radically different relationship to like public health experts as people like who should or should not be trusted with
Yeah.
authority over them. And that the simple nature of that is that that creates opportunities for people to take more responsibility and have more impact because like we are living, you and I are living and like fully like comfortable with the reality that there's widespread systematic institutional failure in America, and that like this idea of like journalists as like neutral, truth seeking, totally objective wise people who are just out to like, you know, keep power accountable, like we know that's complete bullshit, you and
Yeah.
I.
Yeah.
We know
I
that there's
yeah.
stories being told here and the stories are self-mythologizing but they're not reality based.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. The only people I see who still believe in institutions are Gen X, and boomers.
Yeah.
But no matter your, like, political angle, I don't see any, millennials, and, maybe there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance amongst millennials and, Gen Zers, but generally speaking, they all pretty much agree that institutions aren't to be trusted.
Yeah, I think there's
No matter
something
the ideological differences, you know?
that's what's been so powerful about the 21st century and the internet as like an open and free tool, is that it really lets us hold institutions to a higher level of scrutiny than they've ever been held to. And simply having like a front row seat to how the like typical New York Times writer thinks and operates and views the world, that was like inherently a delegitimizing practice for like them and their work and their institution.
Yeah.
And some people still, you know, kind of believe in and swear allegiance to the worldview of the New York Times. A lot of people look at the New York Times and think you guys are crazy people living in a bubble trying to talk down to us and control us, and we're not going to have it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a schism that's just, yeah, based on institutions and trust. And there's something about responsibility there too.
Yeah. I see more people of our generation still trusting the New York Times, but I don't think anybody really trusts, like, Fox News and CNN anymore.
Hmm.
That seems to be, like, really the big, like, major media conglomerates that, like, have lost total trust from young people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in terms of coming of age, that in and of itself is an experience that does, like, breed leadership, right?
Yeah.
Like, to, like, watch the institution that you grew up in completely collapse and be, like, revealed as a farce, that is, like, the only way that somebody can become a leader that that kind of, uh, circumstance needs. Whereas if you grew up with stability for the most part, you're not gonna have the grooming to
Right.
assume that kind of leadership.
You're not going to have the sea legs. You're not going to be used to the boat rocking in the storm.
No, our reality, like, crashed when we were, like, in our 20s. So, by the time we're, like, 50s and 60s, we're gonna probably be pretty comfortable with things falling apart.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Amen.
Amen.
Unfortunately.
I mean,
But
unfortunately or fortunately, I mean, like, I think that some people aren't ready for it and have been made ready for it. I think other people were, like, born to be here
hmm,
in this time and come to grips with the fact that, like, sometimes you think things are one way and then they are completely opposite.
hmm. Okay, I love that framing. You've Shelby told me on this one.
Thank you, thank you. I like making things into lessons.
Yeah. Speaking of lessons, what do you think about like young people receiving wisdom from elders and like young people receiving mentorship from elders? Like, it seems like there's a resistance there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any young person, like, wants to be told, uh, that that what they're doing might not be the right way. It really is, like, sort of experiential, I think, often. But sometimes we find somebody that is a good model for who we wanna be. And I think it's a waste not to seek those people out and
Yeah.
make a mentor of them. I have a friend who's really good at collecting mentors. She's just like in college, she had like 3 professors she would go talk to in her free time for like an hour. And I've never been very good at that. I just maybe it's like it might have been like an insecurity thing at the time, and now I don't really have access to that many people who like have like wisdom that I'm seeking, and maybe I will at some point. But she was so good at it, and I was like, "Hope, how do you find all of these mentors?" And she was like, "Well, it's kind of weird to like wait for somebody to seek you out." She's like,
Mm,
"You have to find people that you want to be like, and then you
yes.
have to pursue them. You have to have the confidence to pursue them and pursue their wisdom." So I think elders sometimes are just like made as a circumstance, but but in order for that to happen, you have to be like a person worth looking up to, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you have to know enough about yourself to like know who you admire and why.
Yeah.
Um, that's an interesting framing. I like the idea of like actively moving towards mentorship, and moving towards the right kind of mentorship. Hmm.
Yeah, she's so good at making mentors. It's crazy. I never knew anybody who was really good at making mentors, and then she came into my life and I was like, "Oh, I need to figure out what she's on." But I also think that uh, you know, a mentor is made like as a sum of like the things that they collect, the wisdom that they collect. And if you collect enough wisdom, people will gravitate towards you and want to know what you've learned. And I think a lot of times people who think that they're elders because they're
Mm,
old want to project their wisdom onto others,
yeah.
when in reality, a wise person just waits and allows others to seek their wisdom.
Mm, that's so true. There's definitely like an energetic flow and current there.
Mhm.
I also there's on this note of it being like difficult for young people to receive wisdom and accept mentorship from old people. I do think there's a hierarchical and a cultural complication here that's making this harder for young people. And basically this complication comes from the way a lot of adults and authority figures falsely valorize young people as being wiser than they are for political purposes. And I'm specifically thinking about like teachers in schools who basically have like a hyper progressive kind of leftist worldview, which
You're the
they,
future.
you're the future, you're going to be the vanguard of the revolution. Like the elders are fucking stupid, man. They don't know anything. Like,
You don't
look
know
at all the
anything.
like racism and sexism and inequality that was created by these greedy, evil elders. Like, but you know, you guys like you see through it, and like, yeah, it's like you're getting the same lesson that like we're teaching us, and you're actually just parroting what we want you to say back to us. But no, you're so like wise and smart for doing that. And there's something about like at every college graduation ceremony, like in like you're just like typical liberal arts school in America, the commencement speaker is going to talk about like how wise and like benighted these graduating students are, and how it's time for them to change the world and like really save the world. And it's like if you have like a single shred of honesty in you, the message would be like, well, you're leaving a bubble. This is actually the part of your life where, for the first time, you are going to discover the real world, and you are going to learn about reality, and you are going to have to think and provide for yourself. And yeah, you're leaving a bubble which has been really insulating you from the nature of the real world, because it's not normal for like everyone to be an academic for 24 years of their life or whatever. That's not
No.
historically normal, and it's not globally normal. That's kind of an anomaly. And there's a sort of inverted moral hierarchy that's being created, where the people who really should be wiser and more authoritative are just kind of like falsely pushing that wisdom and really projecting their own wisdom onto the younger generation in a way that doesn't serve anyone well.
Yeah. I mean, if I were a young person in that audience and I was like able to be really, really honest with myself, I think that would make me panic. You
Hmm.
know, like, what do you mean the future's in my hands? Like, and I think that's seems to be quite a reaction from many young people, is this feeling of like, the future's in my hands. You guys like have no responsibility for this world that you've brought me into. Like, you don't think that you should be able to do anything about this? Like, yeah, it's great that like I you're sort of, I guess, giving me the illusion of power in this circumstance, but like,
Yeah.
where was your power? Did you do it? Did you do anything to make this life better for the future generations and for young people? Like, yeah, there's just again just like a deflection of responsibility through this like sort of like a motivational speech, and it's BS, you know?
Yeah. You got to know
Yeah,
it when you see it, and you got to call it out.
yeah,
And a lot
yeah,
of people don't know it when they see it, and they don't call it out, and then they spend 5 to 10 of their years of their precious life floundering because they believe this like false story.
yeah. And then they'll, do this thing too where it's like no wonder no wonder young people feel sort of like hopeless about the future, right? Because they're like, okay, the world's in my hands and I don't know how to do anything, and so I guess the future is going to be pretty bleak, like it
Right.
makes sense that they're like, this is a shit show and you expect me to fix it. All right, I give up,
Mm.
like there's kind of this, of course, young people feel hopeless about the future. They have nobody guiding them, and you've just pawned off all of your personal responsibility onto young people. It's unfair. Um, and at the same time, I think that they're probably telling the truth. I think we probably are the people who have to fix it, because if you have an entire generation of people whose commencement speeches have to do with the fact that they don't want to take responsibility, then you're probably not going to convince them to.
Yep. That's amen.
Yeah.
The future belongs to people who care, and the people who give a fuck, and the people who are going to take action. And that's going to necessarily, I think, fall on the people who aren't passive and don't have that like activist mindset of like everything about reality is someone else's problem, and the only way to solve the problem is by like yelling and chanting at them until they fix it for you.
Yeah, like crying like a baby until somebody fixes it. No, you just gotta go, like, do something about it. Join your city council,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or
I mean,
or
I don't know.
move into the woods, one of the two.
Or move to the woods, start your own civilization. I like that option. That seems a lot easier, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I think that young people have a right to be bitter, but I think also going forward, if they want to be, uh, if they don't want the young people of the future to feel the way that they feel about their elders, then they need to assume the responsibility of growth and become adults, become parents of either your own children or a community of young people, some sort of like shepherding leadership position, and then, you know, allow yourself to grow into a mentor position.
I feel like this is like almost like a theme, a mission statement of our podcast and our conversations here is this idea of taking responsibility for the ideas that young people hear and
Mhm.
kind of trying to like invite the possibility of a more enchanted worldview, a worldview that's focused on, beauty, truth, goodness, responsibility, agency, community, these like higher spiritual values than just like have a good career and party a lot.
Yeah. I mean, so much of our generations are so interested in like manifestation. It's been like such a
Mm.
big buzzword for a while. And the only way that one manifests is by assuming the role without the reality reflecting it yet. And you have to wait for reality to reflect it. So if you want a positive vision
Yes.
of the future, you have to be able to see it and then you have to put it into action. And you can start doing it now. But you have to be able to imagine a world that's worth living within if you want to create it.
Yeah, like as a man, you have to be boyfriend shaped before you're a boyfriend. You have to be
Mhm.
husband shaped before you become a husband. Um, this is like the nature of the world. Like,
Round peg, round hole,
yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Final question.
Final question.
What stage of spiritual development do you feel like you're in?
Mm,
Kind of in the coming of age and human spiritual life cycle?
sure. I hmm. I mean, I think that I've just sort of like budded into adulthood, maybe a little late. But not astrologically because I'm just going through my Saturn return, so
Have fun.
it this is it finally just passed out of my, like, sort of, like, range of really serious effectiveness, thank the Lord.
Mm.
But, yeah, I feel like I'm just budding into adulthood, in a way where I just feel really excited to take on more responsibilities.
Yeah. Mm. That's beautiful.
How about you?
I think I've had a very kind of uneven maybe life development where in some ways I like matured quite beyond my years at a young age, and then in other ways I was kind of stunted. Um and there's a sort of like interesting like asymmetry and like lopsidedness maybe about my personal growth and development because of that. In some ways I'm an old soul. In some ways I have like a very like childish innocence about a lot of things. I really love having both of those aspects contained within me. Um, I feel this current kind of like sense of possibilities about my future because I'm in a stable living situation, but one that doesn't feel particularly long term. And I know that there's going to be moves happening in the future, which come with kind of like big shifts, big changes in responsibilities, big changes in priorities. And that all of that feels very like kind of like teetering on the edge of adulthood. I definitely feel like I'm, mostly an adult, I would say. I mean, I've felt that way for quite a while, and I've had a pretty good traditional career and a lot of success in kind of the things that I've wanted to at the time. But one of the things that I've sort of like learned a lot in my 20s and early 30s is that these kind of goals and desires I was chasing, they really were a lot thinner and like more hollow than I had anticipated. It's very easy to tell yourself a story about how you'll be happy if you have a better job or you get a promotion. You get this kind of like external validation. But the truth is, like, again and again and again, those feelings fade very quickly. They don't kind of come with any enduring satisfaction for me. And I just keep kind of returning to the integration of that lesson that like all of the most valuable things in life feel like they're about consistently showing up for the thing that's like deeper down in your heart and spirit and trying to like create beauty, create goodness in the world to have a positive impact. Those are the things that make me kind of feel like enduringly good. And I think that kind of feeds in nicely to this idea of like adulthood and accepting responsibility.
Yeah. I like the way you framed sort of like different parts of yourself reaching different parts of maturity. I think that sort of like reframed how I thought of this question for myself too, because I definitely feel like spiritually like quite old
Hmm.
and mature. I think in terms of like the material, I feel quite behind and young and like I'm sort of like just sprouting into responsibility in that way. In my relationship, I feel like pretty solid in my adulthood, like I'm in the middle of it. Um so yeah, I think that there's like different parts of us that like reach different stages of maturity and when we like sort of find them all in alignment, then we're sort of like exactly where we need to be, right? Like there's nothing that needs like sort of lifting or lowering.
Hmm. Beautifully said. I
Mm.
and I always love the word alignment. Alignment
Yeah.
just kind of makes my heart sing.
I know. I've been thinking a lot about alignment. I've been thinking about writing an essay about like what alignment is and what it
Mm,
means. People always talk about spiritual alignment, but I think that people think that they have to like get into alignment when
mm.
really it's like sort of like always there waiting for them and
It's
like
something you relax into, right? Not
yeah.
something you like tense into.
Yes. Yeah, it's not something you try to do, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think there may be some clarity that needs to be made around that. But I feel super aligned in this project, which feels really good.
Me too, sister.
Nice.
All right. Well, I have a feeling we might be talking more about spiritual alignment and things of that nature in a future episode. And thanks
Absolutely.
everyone for listening. It's been a great conversation today.
Yeah, thanks
God bless.
everybody. Yep.